people don't know how to poll Iowa, JD. They don't know how to find out who's going to actually vote. If you look at the Fox poll that you mentioned, they claim that 173,000 Iowans voted in the caucuses last year. But Republicans only had last time, but Republicans only had 120,000 show up. So either they had 53,000 people lie to them, or they are telling us 53,000 Democrats are going to cross over and vote for Donald Trump, which is absurd.
Prominent Iowan, national conservative talk radio show host Steve Deace on our program earlier this week saying that nobody really knows how to poll his home state. That sentiment is shared by others. In fact, in an article appearing on our parent website, Newsmax.com, Bloomberg's Jonathan Bernstein says the polling in Iowa could be, quote, way off. He makes the same point Steve was making, that the turnout could be much lower, and voters often change their minds leading up to and when the caucuses are actually going on. Let's call on our political panel now. First, the chairman of ConservativeHQ.com, Richard Viguerie, who's Skyping in from Northern Virginia, and from Atlanta, Georgia, consultant and pollster Matt Towery. Matt, of course, also the author of the book, News Vesting. Matt, you know the economics, you know polling, doubts about Iowa and the turnout. What do you think's going to happen?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, let me give you an example. In 2008, the pollsters were off, most of them, with regard to Clinton and Obama until the last Des Moines Register poll, because Ann, who actually does that poll out there, Ann Seltzer, figured in that the turnout was going to be much higher and many more young people were going to be involved than anyone expected. Now, whether that's the case on the Republican side this time or whether it's the case on the Democratic side, it's very hard to do. I polled Iowa before. I've gotten it right. I've gotten it close. I've not really ever missed it big time, but I will tell you it's very tricky. You've got to have the right questions at the beginning to try to make sure you're talking to someone who's actually going to go to a caucus, because very small percentage of the voters actually caucus in that state.
Richard Viguerie, like Steve Deace, you are all in for Ted Cruz. Like Mr. Deace, do you think this whole notion of the turnout is being skewed to put Mr. Trump ahead in the polls?
Well, I don't really know. I think Ted Cruz has got a lot of things going for him in Iowa, and on a short list, one of those is he's got the support of Steve Deace and the two others, Congressman Steve King and the family leader head, Bob Vanderplatz. Those are the three most important conservatives in Iowa. And when you've got those three people behind you, it counts for a whole lot. So I think that Cruz is going to be tough to beat. I think Trump is competitive, but I would bet right now on Ted Cruz.
Again, following. Go ahead, Matt.
Let me just say this. Let me just say this,
Richard.
JD, that Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, and liberals, everybody acknowledges that in this campaign, 2016, Ted Cruz has got the best organization, the best ground game across the country. So he's got a lot of advantages going for him next week.
Perhaps a lot of advantages, a lot at stake. And Matt, I want to circle back again to understand this. When you're polling, trying to determine actual caucus goers from those who may be casual when it comes to this, that's the real key to that kind of polling, correct?
Yeah, and you have to look at certain things. Like we would ask questions such as, not only are you going to be participating in the caucus, but questions like, do you know where your caucus will be held? Because people, if they're answering a poll, you start getting into specific questions and they can't answer it or they feel uncomfortable, you toss them out. That has proven to be a better way of sort of straining through this. But I want to get to what Richard said. I mean, I certainly take my hat off to the man who I think virtually invented grassroots Republican outreach and direct mail and so much. And he's probably the best in the world to let us know when somebody has a great ground game. And I believe Cruz does have a great ground game there. I do think, however, this is going to be the first test of whether Donald Trump really is turning out additional voters, because that has really been the key as we polled him in South Carolina, and when we polled him for Fox in Florida and in Georgia and other states. A lot of that has to do with, if you look at the demographics, the age, the people who are 18 to 29 are overwhelmingly for Trump. They don't usually vote. They usually don't turn out. They turned out and got excited for Barack Obama back 8 years ago, whether this is going to happen on the Trump side or not, we don't know. If that doesn't happen, then I would agree with Richard completely, and that is that Cruz's ground game will control. If that does happen, or even if it gets close, then we're going to realize that when you get out of Iowa and into areas like New Hampshire, South Carolina, then those SEC primary states, then Trump is probably going to be in a better position than we expected.
We will have to leave it there. Matt Towery in Atlanta, Richard Viguerie in Virginia. We will keep an eye out for surprises because of the uncertainty of the polling and the turnout. One thing we are certain of, Matt's new book is entitled News Vesting, so you want to check that out. Now, we'd like you to invest some time in sending us your comments on what these two had to say. You can send me your comments at newsmaxtv.com/comments.